I really love the themes of what is hidden and what is revealed, and I think that's part of what appeals to me about using the metaphor of shadow when we talk about spiritual direction, so that we're helping people be aware that there's what's going on in our conscious mind, but we also really want to access what's happening in the unconscious. You know how in Judaism we talk about the klipa, like the husk that kind of covers the divine spark, and about how spiritual practice is about, I usually think of it as like cracking away that husk, but it's more like shedding it. Sometimes I need a crowbar,
right?
But having practices that like that part of the shadow and that husk is a protection, that it's a kind of a natural human strategy to want to protect the most vulnerable part of ourselves. And so in some ways the klipa is a shadow that obscures, and it also is protecting our shadow. It's this kind of weird non-linear thing. So there was just something about knowing that there's that communal quality to the experience, that shadow isn't just about what are the parts of myself that are hidden necessarily, but also that there's this collective sense of shadow. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think the sense that we're kind of all in this together, so it's not only the collective shadow, but this sense of kind of being able to be there, and as you work on whatever is your shadow, or in Musar we talk about spiritual curriculum, that everybody has their own unique spiritual curriculum. So what's hidden is this divineness, this sacredness, and it's covered over by the husk, the klipa. And your curriculum doesn't look like mine. We each get one. But there's something about your curriculum that helps me, and there's something about my curriculum that can help you. And that interplay, that finding each other's brokenness and healing it together, or uncovering what's really this pure neshama, this pure soul underneath, it's kind of a wonderful journey to be on.
Truly. When I think about shadow and the way people talk about it often conventionally, it's like light is good and shadow is bad. And I think some of that just comes from racism and racial bias that's so deeply embedded in the culture. And so I've really been appreciating the ways that people talk about shadow as mystery. And even what you said about finding your voice in the shadow, that in some of our unclaimed gifts are also hidden in the shadow, and that we're going to constantly be moving between what's hidden and what's revealed, and to not fear what's in the shadow.
Right.
I'm thinking about that Rebbe Nachman quote about God waiting in those places, in those obscured places, to trust that that God is there too.
Yeah. I think he actually uses the word brokenness. God waits for you in those deep, dark crevices. I'm not sure. I think I interpret it as brokenness.
That's great. Hey, we're all about interpretation.
Right.
And to have another person, again, I'm kind of going back to thinking, like, as a spiritual director, if I'm doing shadow work with people, or in some way trying to access the hidden part, sometimes all I'm doing is just sitting there with them in a posture of inquiry. I may actually not say anything, but just be curious with some kind of gentle invitation, and especially something like a chant, a gesture, a question that allows the ego to rest and access the rest.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that spiritual direction in general is such a lovely modality to be working with the shadow, because it is that, most of the time, soft, gentle, questioning, invitational, having a chance to be reflective and trying to go deeper and seeing what gets uncovered. That we have some resistance for some reason. We've built up some kind of covering on it, and through that gentle, slow, at least it feels like for me, slow process, something is revealed that if you had really frontally assaulted it, would have retreated even farther.
I feel like part of what happens in supervision is a place to open up and access the shadow in that multidimensional way that each spiritual director and their directee and the presence of God, and then in supervision, we're kind of uncovering the mystery. I'm sort of like peering down into it. We're like uncovering the mystery together.
Yeah, that great metaphor of looking into the well together. You know, you're both seeing a reflection, but it's actually a different reflection. You're seeing it from a different perspective. It's a nice image of, you know, looking deep down into something, but also seeing reflected back who you are and where you are.
Can you just describe a little bit about when you're doing Musar work, like in a group, like what do you actually do?
Well, I actually hypothetically, you know, we teach it in the program that I'm associated with, and that's got a very different quality to it. But I actually did run my first Musar group, and had to kind of figure out how I wanted to do it. And so we talk a little bit about it. We look at some text. There's chanting, so there's a chanting practice. People can reflect and meditate. And then there's something called Heshbon HaNefesh, which is a soul accounting, and that's usually an evening reflection. And some people do movement to try to get the body engaged in it. And the idea is that you're preparing yourself for the constricted time that you're going to hit up against your spiritual curriculum, and you're not actually like exposing your curriculum as you work on it right here and now, but you're preparing yourself. So if you've got this chant going in your mind, you know, I will take my rightful place and I will allow others to take their rightful place. I'm thinking about humility as because it's such a core thread that we look at, Mitta, that we look at, that's very core to Musar. As you think that, you're kind of incorporating it, you chant it, you might even do some kind of movement with it. So when something comes up, it flashes in your head, is because you've been working on it. Oh, am I taking my rightful place? Am I allowing the other person to take their rightful place? Do I need to step up a little bit more? Do I need to step back? So it's really kind of a self-correction, that you're preparing yourself so that, you know, when you hit that piece, you're going to be able to correct back. I'm also a Pilates instructor, so it reminds me very much of Pilates, which is, you're not going to do this perfectly. You're going to attempt to do it, but if I'm being a good instructor, I'm teaching you how to self-correct, so that when you start getting into your position, you're going to say, oh, wait, I need to tip my pelvis here, I need to pull in my, you know, my lower abdominals, I need to do this, and I'm just, you know, periodically cueing you. And I think Musar is a very similar, like, we're giving people these cues so they can continue to, like, throughout their day, think about it and self-correct.
It's so true that it's not only that our thoughts and emotions are in the shadow, but the way that we hold shadow, so to speak, in our body, or the way the shadow holds our bodies, and that incorporating the somatic aspect with the spiritual and the psycho-emotional really makes a difference, because especially for people who are really well practiced in their thinking and talking, and that kind of when you were just describing that, I was thinking about making oneself supple enough to approach the spiritual curriculum.
That's lovely.
And so there's a certain way, I think, at least for me, of being able to kind of go in through, start at the back door, because if you go in through the brain, my ego is already like, I got this, no problem. And so to just begin with the breath, or to begin with mindful noticing as a way to go toward suppleness, so that you can then encounter humility, or the whichever midah you happen to be working with. And again, it's like that balance, right? So too soft and supple is kind of like an overcooked lasagna noodle, and too boundaried is too rigid. And so, but you need a little bit of both.
When you first hear about shadow, sometimes you're feeling about, oh, it's, you know, keep it hidden. It's the negative stuff that I don't want to incorporate it in. It's been such a blessing to actually mine it, uncover it, and to incorporate it and befriend it.